I was 20 years old and still calling our small blue house in Seattle my home. It wasn't fancy, but it had white trim, a porch swing that creaked when you pushed it too high, and a view of Lake Union if you stood on the front steps and leaned to the left. I grew up in that house. Every corner held a memory of my mother, Evelyn Hart, who is said to have died in a highway crash 2 years before. Since the day she was gone, everything in my life turned cold. My father, Robert Hart, was quick to fill the silence. He remarried a sharp-tongued woman named Vanessa Cole. She came into the house with 3 oversized suitcases, a collection of perfumes that stung the nose, and a smile that looked more like a warning than a welcome. From the moment she moved in, I felt like a guest in my own home. Life shrank after that. I studied accounting at a local community college because it was all I could afford, juggling part-time shifts at the campus library. Each dollar I earned went to books, gas, and the occasional secondhand sweater. Vanessa had made it clear that I wasn't to rely on my father for help. "You're an adult now," she said, as if 20 meant I should have a savings account fat enough to carry me into forever. I ignored her, tried to keep my head down, and told myself I just needed time to finish school and build my own path. But deep down, I knew she was waiting for the day she could push me out for good. That day came sooner than I thought. It was a gray Monday morning. I had just finished brewing coffee and was packing my tote bag with textbooks for my afternoon class. I heard the door slam open. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs, then my bedroom door swung wide. My father stood in the doorway, his face tired but set like stone. Behind him was Vanessa, holding a cardboard box. She didn't bother to hide her smirk. "Pack up," Robert said. His tone was flat, like this was a task he had no feelings about. "The house isn't yours. You're old enough to make your own way." Vanessa's laugh cut through the room. "There is no one in this house for you anymore. You're 20, not 12. Your room will make a perfect office." Her voice filled every corner of my room like smoke, thick and suffocating. My chest tightened. I tried to reason with him. "Dad, this was Mom's house. She paid the mortgage. She worked every day in the basement for her design studio. She wanted me to stay here until I finished school." My voice cracked, but I kept speaking. "She left me her sewing machines, her sketches. You can't just throw me out." Robert waved his hand, dismissing my words like they were dust. "Don't be dramatic. Life moves on. So should you." Before I could protest again, Vanessa picked up the framed photograph of my mother from my nightstand. She studied it for half a second, then let it fall into the cardboard box. The glass cracked, the sound sharp and final. It felt like a knife in my chest. I grabbed my suitcase from under the bed, clutching the handle with both hands. They pulled at it. I pulled back. My father wasn't strong, but his grip was steady and determined. Vanessa tugged at my arm. We stumbled into the hallway, my feet sliding across the old runner rug that had been there since childhood. "Get out," Vanessa snapped, her voice like broken glass. I braced myself for the final push when a voice came from the open front door. "You cannot put her out. Not like this." The words were steady, clear, and carried the kind of weight that makes people stop mid-breath. I turned my head. A tall man in a navy coat stood on the porch. I had seen him before, passing by our street in the evenings, but I'd never spoken to him. He stepped forward, his presence filling the space, as if he had every right to be there. My father stiffened. "This is a family matter. You'd better mind your own business." The man's gaze didn't waver. "Family matter or not, this house isn't yours to give away." Robert laughed, a short, bitter sound, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. "Who are you to tell me what's mine?" The stranger reached into his coat and pulled out a small card. "Miles Grant. I'm an attorney, and I happen to know that this deed doesn't have your name on it." My stomach flipped. "Deed? Attorney?" Vanessa's face tightened, but she held on to my suitcase, tugging harder. I lost my balance and fell onto the porch steps, scraping my palm on the concrete. For a moment, the sky above looked too bright, too sharp, as if it wanted to remind me how exposed I was. Through the hedges, I saw the glint of Lake Union, cold and restless. Vanessa hissed, This is nonsense. We're not trespassing in our own house. Miles didn't move.
His voice stayed calm.
That depends on what the deed says. And I can assure you, I've already looked into it. He pulled out his phone and dialed. His tone was so casual, so steady, it was as if he were reading a grocery list instead of reporting a possible eviction attempt. My father's jaw twitched. He shouted something about lawyers and lies, but before his anger could boil further, the sound of a car door echoed from the street. Heels clicked against the pathway. A woman walked up the steps, her scarf slipping from her shoulders, her breath quick from moving quickly. I froze. My chest tightened until I thought I might stop breathing altogether. It was my mother. Her hair was shorter, her frame thinner, her skin pale, but her eyes, green, sharp, and familiar, were the same eyes I saw every time I looked in the mirror. My world tilted. For 2 years, I had carried her absence like a wound that would never close. And here she was standing in front of me alive. I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't obey. Tears blurred my sight, but the sound of her voice cut through everything. "Robert," she said, her voice steady but hard as steel. "Let go of my daughter." The air shifted. My father's hand dropped from the suitcase. Vanessa's smirk cracked, replaced by a look of shock so complete she almost looked like a stranger. Miles lowered his phone and stepped aside, letting the truth settle into the space like thunder after lightning. I sat there on the porch, shaking, unable to stand. My mother was alive. My life, which had felt like it was unraveling thread by thread, suddenly pulled tight into something new. The house I thought I had lost, the family I thought was gone, the fight I thought I couldn't win, it all changed in the space of a single heartbeat. And with her words, the day that began with me being dragged out of my own home turned into the day my world cracked open with truth. When my mother stepped onto the porch that day, everything froze. For 2 years, I had lived with the story that she had died in the wreck on I-5. I had grieved her with a broken heart, listened to people tell me how time heals all wounds, and tried to make peace with a world without her. And yet here she was, breathing real, standing inches away from the man who had replaced her and the woman who had tried to erase me. We went inside, none of us saying much at first. The air was heavy, as if the walls themselves didn't know whose side they were on. My mother sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling, but her eyes never left mine. When she reached for me, her fingers were warm and alive, and I thought I might never let go. Vanessa stood frozen in the corner, her face drained of color, her smirk gone. My father whispered my mother's name like a prayer, though it sounded more like disbelief than love. Finally, my mother spoke. "There were 2 women in that crash," she said softly. "Me and my sister Caroline and I. We wore the same coat that day. We always joked that we looked like twins. When the accident happened, everything was chaos. They pulled us out and mixed up our IDs. Caroline died instantly. I survived, but with broken ribs, a head injury, and no way to speak for weeks. They thought I was her, and I didn't even know who I was at first. By the time my memory came back and I told them my name, no one believed me." Her voice caught, but she forced herself to continue. "It took months to find the right people, to get the records corrected, to prove I was alive. And all that time I thought about you." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at me. "I asked for you every single day. But Robert," she shifted her gaze to my father, "you never came. You never asked questions. You just moved on." The silence that followed was unbearable. My father blinked rapidly, his lips moving, but no words came out. It was Miles, the lawyer from next door, who broke the silence. "I checked the county records this morning," he said, spreading out a few papers on the coffee table. Something didn't add up. "Years ago, I filed paperwork for Evelyn's design studio. That's how I knew the deed for this house was always in her name alone. Robert, your name was never on it. During probate, the accounts and assets were frozen until identity could be confirmed. Now that Evelyn's alive, all of it reverts to her." Vanessa's face twisted into anger. "This is insane," she spat, folding her arms tightly. "You're all making this up." But my mother wasn't shaken. She reached for the folder sitting on the table, one I hadn't noticed before. Inside was a draft contract Vanessa had been pushing my father to sign. It would have sold the house for a quick $740,000. Miles tapped the paper and shook his head. Fast sale. Way below market. This place is worth at least $1.15 million. My mother's jaw tightened. You tried to sell my home under my nose, she said to Vanessa, her voice sharp with fury. Vanessa lunged for her purse, muttering about leaving, but Miles stepped into the doorway. He didn't raise his voice, but his calm words stopped her cold. Fraud is fraud, even if the ink isn't dry yet. The police would take an interest. He let the threat hang in the air. My mother lifted her chin. You'll leave, both of you, she said firmly. This marriage is over. I filed for divorce this morning as soon as the court confirmed my identity. My father's knees seemed to buckle. He lowered himself into the armchair, his hands covering his face. Evelyn, please. I made mistakes. I was grieving. Vanessa said she could help. The bills, the mortgage, I couldn't do it alone. I was weak. Please forgive me. His voice broke, tears slipping down his cheeks. My mother stared at him, her expression unreadable. At last she said, You let her throw our daughter out of her own house. That's not a bill, Robert. That's a choice. I felt my chest tighten. Part of me wanted to shout, to tell him everything I had bottled up over 2 years. The nights I cried myself to sleep, the days I skipped meals to stretch my money, the loneliness of watching him smile at Vanessa like she had fixed his life while I became invisible. But I stayed quiet because my mother's words were enough. By evening, Robert had packed a single bag. Vanessa stuffed 3 suitcases, the same one she had carried in when she first arrived. Neither of them said goodbye. They called a rideshare, and I watched from the porch as the car pulled away. The porch light glowed above us, rain misted in the air, and I stood wrapped in the old red blanket my mother draped around my shoulders, the same one she had bought years ago at a market in Boston when she and my father were still in love. Back then, we visited New England in the fall, crunching leaves underfoot, and I thought my family would last forever. When they were gone, Miles sat at the dining table with us. He laid out more papers. The accounts tied to the studio were locked during the identity confusion, he explained. Now they're back in your name, Evelyn. That's about $420,000 in working capital. There's also the investment portfolio you built years ago, before your daughter was even born. That's worth $1.35 million now, spread across index funds and bonds. My breath caught. For years, money had been a shadow in the corner of every conversation. I had rationed food, skipped social events, and dreaded unexpected bills. Now, suddenly, money wasn't a threat, it was a door. And my mother held the key. I looked at her, still unable to fully believe she was alive, sitting here, smiling at me through tears. She squeezed my hand. We're not losing anything ever again, she said. This is our house, our life, and I'm not leaving you again. That night, after Miles left, my mother and I curled up on the couch together, the blanket wrapped around both of us. I rested my head on her shoulder like I used to when I was a child, and for the first time in years, I felt safe. The house was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the old clock on the mantel. But to me, it felt alive again, as if the walls were exhaling after holding in so much grief. My father was gone. Vanessa was gone. My mother was alive. And our story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The days that followed my mother's return felt like living in a dream I wasn't ready to wake from. For 2 years, I had thought she was gone, yet now she walked the same halls again, moving from room to room as if she was reclaiming them from shadows. The house, which had once felt like a tomb, slowly came alive. I heard her humming in the mornings as she brewed coffee, smelled her perfume lingering in the air, and saw her sketches piled on the dining table again. For the first time in years, the house looked like it belonged to us and no one else. We started with practical matters. A locksmith came and changed every lock on the doors, the garage, and even the basement, where her studio equipment sat covered in dust. Mom insisted on new codes for the alarm system. Fresh start, she said, and I couldn't argue. We bought a safe from a hardware store downtown, $6.90 for a steel box bolted to the closet floor. It wasn't huge, but it was heavy, unmovable, and perfect for holding the deed to the house. Our bank statements and the growing stack of legal documents Miles had helped us prepare. I felt better just hearing the click of its lock. Mom reopened her design studio, Evelyn Hart Design, in the basement. The space smelled faintly of paint and sawdust, a mix that reminded me of her long work nights when I was a child. She dusted off her old drafting table, polished her sketching tools, and pulled fabric samples from boxes she had hidden away. The studio had always been her sanctuary, and now it was open again. She paid off the overdue bills, then turned to me with an offer that changed my path. "I need someone I trust with the books," she said. "I'll pay you $24 an hour. It's fair, and it means you can finish school without drowning." The relief that flooded me was almost too much. For years, I had worked part-time jobs that paid barely above minimum wage. Now I could work fewer hours and still afford tuition. More importantly, I would be working beside her, keeping her business steady while she rebuilt her name. I accepted without hesitation, and soon my evenings were spent balancing ledgers, creating spreadsheets, and watching numbers line up neatly like puzzle pieces falling into place. It was the first time I realized I actually loved numbers. Miles came by often in those weeks. He had become more than a neighbor. He was now the steady hand guiding us through legal storms. At our kitchen table, he explained what a trust was and why we needed one. "It keeps things clean," he said. "No confusion about ownership, no loopholes for anyone else to try again. The house and the investments go into the Heart Living Trust. Evelyn, you're the trustee, and your daughter is the beneficiary." The words sounded heavy, but I understood the meaning. The house was safe, and so was my future. My mother smiled when Miles said, "Clear and simple." She liked the sound of those words, and so did I. One morning, Mom surprised me with an envelope at breakfast. My coffee was still steaming when I pulled out the letter inside. It said she intended to gift me the house on my 21st birthday. My throat closed as I read it, tears blurring the words. She had also written about a small account in London my grandmother had opened years ago, one Mom had quietly added to over time. It now held £150,000, waiting for me. "It's a nod to the year I studied in London," she said softly, "the year I learned to sketch buildings by hand." I laughed through my tears when little circles of coffee stains marked the bottom of the page. I couldn't believe this was real. For the first time in years, my future wasn't only about survival. Of course, the past wasn't done with us yet. My father showed up at the porch not once but twice. The first time, he stood there with slumped shoulders, asking if we could talk. He told me Vanessa had left him, that he was renting a room near the waterfront and working part-time at a warehouse. "I don't have much left," he admitted, staring at the floor. "Just a few $1,000s. I thought maybe your mother could help me." I wanted to laugh, but instead I spoke calmly. "She already helped you by not calling the police when you tried to sell her house. That's more than enough." He nodded without meeting my eyes. The second time, he brought flowers and an apology letter. He held out the bouquet awkwardly, the petals already drooping. I took the letter, not the flowers. "Forgiveness," I told him, "isn't a light switch. You don't just flip it on." He looked at me with wet eyes, but I stood firm. It was the first time I felt stronger than him. By late spring, my mother had rebuilt her client list. One of her first major projects took us to New York City. I had never been before. We stayed in a modest hotel near Bryant Park, where the air smelled like roasted chestnuts from the street vendors. We ate pretzels while walking through the crowded streets, laughing at how different the city felt from Seattle. Her client, a bookstore owner in Brooklyn, wanted a redesign of a shop. The contract was for $82,000, enough to pay her staff and leave plenty for new materials. Watching her sign the papers, I saw the spark return to her face. She was alive in every way that mattered. For me, New York was a window into possibility. I saw the way she came alive when her work was valued, and I realized that I, too, felt alive when I made numbers balance, when budgets lined up, when savings grew. Her gift was design. Mine was order. Together, they fit. Back in Seattle, I bought my first car, a used hatchback for $9,800. I paid cash, something I had never thought possible. The car wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I learned to check the oil, replace the windshield wipers, and even change a tire. Each small act made me feel capable, grounded in a way I had never felt before. I also opened my own savings account. I started with $12,000, money from my work at Mom's studio. By the end of summer, it had grown to $18,500. It wasn't millions like in the trust, but it was mine, earned and saved with my own hands. That mattered more than the number itself. It was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. By September, the house no longer felt like the battlefield it had once been. It was ours again, steady and safe. Every corner carried laughter instead of fear. My mother had her studio. I had my spreadsheets and my classes. And together we had a plan. The trust was in place, the locks were secure, the accounts were safe, and the future, our future, finally felt like something worth reaching for. On the morning of my 21st birthday, Seattle skies were bright and clear, a rare gift in a city that seemed to live under clouds. My mother and I drove to Miles's office in her old silver sedan. The ride was quiet, but not tense, just thoughtful. I stared out the window at the city I had grown up in, the streets where I had walked with books in my arms, the corners where I had once felt like a shadow. Now, everything looked different, brighter somehow, as if the air itself had shifted in my favor. Inside the office, the light poured through wide windows onto a polished oak table. Miles greeted us with his calm, steady smile and slid a stack of papers toward me. "Today," he said, "we make it official." My hands trembled as I lifted the pen. The deed to the house, the very place where I had been dragged toward the door just a year earlier, now carried my name. I signed slowly, carefully, almost reverently, as though each stroke of ink was stitching my life back together. When the final page was complete, Miles handed me a copy of the valuation. $1 to $20,000, he said. My head swam at the number. To me, the house was priceless, filled with laughter, pain, and history. But seeing it written down in black and white made me realize its weight in the world. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering in my ear, "A home is more than walls, but good walls help." We laughed through tears, and Miles snapped a photo of us by the window. It is still one of my favorite pictures. 2 women who had survived storms, standing together in the light. That evening, we hosted a small gathering in the house that was now mine. Friends filled the kitchen, carrying dishes and warm voices. Sophia, my closest friend from school, brought her famous lemon bars. Mrs. Green, our neighbor of 30 years, brought a potted plant with wide, shiny leaves. "Give it sunlight and kind words," she said with a wink, as if plants understood language better than most people. We stood together in the kitchen, plates in our hands, and I suggested we thank the house. So we did, out loud, all of us, as though the walls themselves had been listening through the long storm. Maybe they had. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail addressed to me in handwriting I recognized instantly. My father. I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself for anger or demands. Instead, I found words I had not expected. He wrote that he had joined a recovery group, that he had steady work now at a shipping company near the docks. He admitted that he had lost his place in my life, that he knew I owed him nothing, but that he hoped I would believe he was trying to be a better man, even if I never saw it for myself. I read the letter to my mother at the kitchen table. She listened quietly, then placed her hand on my shoulder. "Some doors," she said gently, "we leave unlocked from the inside, just in case." I thought about her words long into the night. The next morning, I wrote back with only 2 lines. "I hope you stay on your path. I am not ready to see you yet." It was honest, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for holding my boundary. Life didn't transform into perfection. It became something better, honest. I graduated from community college, and accepted a job at a small firm in downtown Seattle that specialized in accounting for art studios and nonprofits. My starting salary was $62,000, more than I had ever imagined earning at 21. During the day, I worked with clients, balancing their books and finding clarity in the columns of numbers. At night, I returned home to help my mother draft proposals for her design projects. She had landed a client in Portland and another in Chicago. Together, we tracked every receipt, every billable hour, watching her studio grow steady legs again. The heart-living trust grew too, quietly, like a tree adding rings each season. Miles sent updates every quarter, showing how the investments and accounts were performing. And then there was the London account, the one my grandmother had opened and my mother had nurtured. £150,000 sat quietly, untouched, like a calm lake. Knowing it was there made me feel grounded, as though the past and the future had allied to protect me. On Saturdays, I often stood on the porch swing, watching the light move across Lake Union. I thought back to the day Vanessa laughed at me, saying I had no one in the house, and how wrong she had been. I had my mother, alive and fierce. I had a neighbor who had spoken up when it mattered most. And I had myself, older, wiser, no longer afraid of being abandoned. I had a house with good walls, a porch swing, and a red blanket that warmed us on cold nights. That was more wealth than I could ever count. People sometimes asked me what I had learned from everything. I would pause, then answer carefully. I learned that love is a kind of wealth that cannot be stolen, only shared. I learned that money is power only when it serves a purpose, not when it sits locked away or used as a weapon. I learned that paper, whether it's a deed, a contract, or a letter, can build or destroy, so it must be read, questioned, and respected. Most of all, I learned that forgiveness is not a trophy to hand out. It is a path some people may never choose to walk. In my kitchen now hangs a wall of memories. There's a photo of my mother and me in New York, laughing with pretzels in our hands, the city glowing behind us. Next to it is a framed copy of the deed with my name on it. Each night when I lock the door, I touch the frame gently, grounding myself in the truth of my life. My mother did not die. She came home. My father cannot change the past, but he is trying to change himself. And the house, our house, did not save us. We saved each other, and the house became a safe place to hold that truth. I used to panic at the sound of boxes scraping across the floor, the sound of being packed and discarded. Now, I keep 2 empty boxes in my closet on purpose. They remind me that I can leave whenever I need to, and they remind me that I choose to stay. That choice is power. This is my home in Seattle, America. This is my story, told in my own words. And it ends the way it should. Not with loss, but with survival. Not with silence, but with truth. We stayed, we healed, and in the end, we kept what was ours.